Hello and welcome back now on day 16 of our reading through Isaiah for this Advent season. Today we are in chapters 46, 47, and 48. And of course, my goal here is to give some highlights of the passages in 10 minutes or so. This is far from any exhaustive kind of Bible study. One thing that we have ascertained from Isaiah up to this point is that when Isaiah picks up a theme, he doesn't hold back. He goes all in, and he's going to stress that theme continuously. And so the beautiful poetry continues. And even though in his more optimistic voice, some of the reading can be a little dense sometimes, but it's a lot more relaxing. It's a lot more hopeful and all of that. So in chapter 46, the theme of returning from exile is still there. Now, this isn't, when we've been reading over the last few chapters of the return from exile, this isn't happening yet. The people are still in exile. They are still in Babylon. They're still dispersed from their homeland. They're dispersed in such a way that this is why in the time of Jesus, and then when we look through the Pauline letters, there's pockets of Judaism throughout the Mediterranean world, which does include some of Europe within the Pauline epistles. They were dispersed, and many of them remain dispersed. When we walked through the book of Acts together a couple of years back, we saw that there was ones that were dispersed, and we talked about how many of them would try to move to the Holy Land late in life so they could be buried there. But anyway, so they're still in exile, still in Babylon, but yet these words of encouragement and hope are coming through. Here, the family of Jacob, you are left from the family of Israel. You've been carried from birth. You've been supported from the time you've left the womb. And now that you're old, even in your gray hair, I will carry you. Some of these people are getting old. They're aging in exile. And of course, one inevitably wonders, are we ever going to make it back? Will things ever be the same? And for many of them, it would never be the same. But yet there's the promise that return is going to happen. Even though for us now, we still yet wait for the ultimate revealing of the kingdom of Jesus Christ. We've seen forerunners. We've worked to establish those forerunners here on earth. And yet we wondered, will things ever be the way that they are supposed to be? Will ultimate justice ever prevail? And yet we have the hope that it will, even though it may not be in our lifetimes. Let's see, there's something else I wanted to mention. Maybe it's here in verse 12. You stubborn people, you distance yourself from doing what is right. I am bringing deliverance near. It is not far away. I'm bringing salvation near. It does not wait. I will save Zion. I will adorn Israel with my splendor. And so, here, these people in exile, these people who were stubborn people, yet what God is doing here is something that not only addresses their stubbornness and their distance from doing what's right, but also demonstrates God's deliverance and his salvation. And of course, it's going to move now into chapter 47. Babylon will fall. And so, even while they have been told of Cyrus in yesterday's reading, the leader of Persia that is going to rise, yet they're still dealing with Babylon. And here it's very poetic language of how Babylon is going to fall. And in fact, when we go to the book of Revelation, we see Babylon mentioned there very prominently a couple of times, as well as in other parts of the Old Testament. Babylon, as well as Egypt, but I believe in Babylon in a different way. Babylon ends up representing empire throughout Scripture. And so when it's used out of historical context, like in the book of Revelation, it's referring to empire. It's code language, but it's not all that cryptic. And so in the book of Revelation, what empire are they dealing with that's persecuting the people? Well, it's the Roman Empire. Babylon was the first great empire that put the people in exile. Egypt is also used to represent empire, but in a little bit different way. Yeah, they were an empire, but they were different. They didn't come to the area of Israel and subdue the people. Yet the people went to Egypt, and then they ended up slaves there, and they had to be liberated from slavery. And so it's two different scenarios. So Egypt represents in Scripture bondage, while Babylon represents empire. You'll notice several times throughout the Bible, Egypt is used in a context outside of its historical context. It's used as being representative of something, representative of bondage. All right. Now moving on to chapter 48. There's this complex relationship that the Hebrews have with God through the Old Testament. And I think that it's worth noting. We are aware of it. It's visible, very visible in Isaiah. One of where they are failing God. They are not meeting their demands as covenant people. And that world, relationship was dependent on covenant. It was a way that they understood. Covenant was something they could relate to. But yet, throughout their history, it was something they were unwilling to adhere to. And so we see the contrast, the God who is disappointed, upset, in judgment, contrasting in a seeming contrast between the God here who's also trying to shelter them, welcome him in his arms, and give them love and protection. In fact, not only do we see this throughout Scripture, throughout the Old Testament, it's very visible here in the writing of Isaiah. And so we find a lot of mixed language here about God's disappointment. I did this because I know how stubborn you are. There's this idea through the Old Testament that people have to be taught through the exile. I believe the idea in Scripture is that in the course of human history, with some measured progress, covenant is supposed to evolve into something that is of mutual trust and commitment between God and his people. In the same way that in the Old Testament, marriage is often used as a metaphor of God's relationship with his covenant of people, and it is in the New Testament as well, as the concept of marriage has changed in this regard, that it's no longer about a man securing property and a woman's legal business obligation to fit and maintain the cultural norms. So I think in the course of Scripture and the transition between covenants of Old Testament and New Testament, it kind of works how marriage has transitioned from patriarchal society into modern society in our part of the world, and the European Western part of the world, as well as other parts of the world, where marriage is more than is a business transaction, but marriage is a union of people, common purpose, common goal, sharing life, based on trust rather than suspicion, based on loyalty, cooperation, obligation with one another. And so, sometimes it's as things has changed culturally. That's not all bad, of course. And as things change through Scripture, I think I think that as people have changed, God's way of dealing with people is something that also has changed. The concepts that we use to identify God have changed. Now, that's a very loaded statement, and I don't have time to elaborate on all of that. And so please don't take me at my worst on that. If you must watch this and rewatch this again to catch my drift, because it's not a blanket endorsement of everything that goes on in society by any means. All right, it's past 11 minutes now, so I'm going to leave it here.